All right, so let's get started. So welcome to today's webinar from JTF Marketing. Get more from Marketo Engage. What's next on your digitalization journey? So I'm sure lots of you have already had a lot of questions around, how do you keep evolving? How do we keep adding to the capabilities of Marketo, maximizing it? And today we're going to go through some examples of how we might be able to do that. So for those of you new to JTF Marketing, we've been around for over 8 years now, focused purely on Marketo and its ecosystem and really helping customers go further with Marketo. So how do we get more out of the platform? How do we get those wish list items ticked off so that we can actually get better results and automate a lot of processes? There's a big challenge here, of course, of making sure that this happens. Some of these wonderful businesses that we've worked with on the screen have already had some success in optimizing their Marketo platform and getting a bit more out of it. And of course, that's across a range of different industries that Marketo can be applied, as well as different use cases. So today we're going to be talking about how do we build a Marketo maturity model? How do we get some more quick wins out of the platform? And what does it look like when we translate that into a digital roadmap? So how do we get it more embedded? How do we get more results out of Marketo? And importantly, how can we really start measuring the effectiveness of a platform like Marketo itself? For those of you who have never been on a webinar with me before, I'm James Fletcher. I'm one of the Adobe Certified Master Marketo Engage Architect, quite a mouthful, but ultimately I've been around Marketo for 14 years now, building a range of solutions and architecting different capabilities. So there's a lot of questions that typically come out of this session. So as they come up, let me know. Be more than happy to answer them. Again, Q&A is in the bottom of your screen. Any chat messages I'll also see. And of course, if you've got any problems and you have to jump maybe a little bit earlier out of this 30-minute session, we will be sending out the recording after today's webinar. So first, let's talk about the Marketo maturity model. So some of you may have already seen this. It's often referred to as a customer journey maturity model as well in Adobe terminology. But ultimately, we've got these kind of 4 levels that we're working to. We've got the as-is marketing. I've just moved from MailChimp into Marketo or HubSpot into Marketo, and I'm doing the basics. I'm getting campaigns out the door. I'm batching and blasting to specific audiences. We might be then starting to get into a little bit more triggered activity around level 2. So starting to be a little bit more personalized using tokens or trigger-based activity in campaigns and automating some of those common processes like form fill out, lead routing, etc. Or level 3, we might be starting to look at how do we scale marketing operations within our organization? How do we scale our content? How do we measure content effectiveness? And how do we better understand what works and what doesn't? Of course, then we move into the holy grail of level 4, which is how do we get to always on lifecycle based marketing in Marketo? Now, these 4 steps have actually got quite a lot of things in common. You've got to get level 1 right in order to get to level 4, but you can leapfrog a number of these sections at once, depending on the roadmap you're working to, depending on the capabilities in your business, and importantly, the content that you've got available to you, right? So the trick is getting all your content into Marketo in order to maximize it. Now, if you'd like to learn a bit more about this Marketo maturity model, there's a link here at the bottom of the screen that you can go to and find out a little bit more information. But we will be talking about this throughout today's webinar, so don't feel free yet to jump over to that link because I'm going to probably give you the detail that you're probably looking for. Now, there's a couple of ways that we, as I mentioned, we can leapfrog some of the processes in Marketo and actually get more value out of the platform from day one. And there's kind of 4 key points, especially when you've been using Marketo a bit of time. So most customers that we speak to, they've had Marketo maybe 1, maybe 2 years. They've been building it. They've been trying to get their heads around it, think about how they use it, how are they going to apply their marketing strategy to this marketing technology. And how's that going to then filter back into the strategy in order to give us a better plan and approach? We can do this in a couple of ways. 1, getting an audit of your instance is really, really important. So understanding that your technical implementation has been successful. Most people don't check that they've actually done it correctly. They just take for granted that we've ticked all the things on the list from Adobe or Marketo. Our partner did it, and we trust that they were meant to be doing it correctly, but there's a few things that don't quite work correctly. Just go back and have a sanity check. That's the baseline of getting an insight into how well are you currently using your platform. The second quick win is actually starting to look at data hygiene, and we'll talk a bit more about this in a minute. So again, how do I understand what data I've got in there is correct, from field management to the data points that I've collected through forms? Is it consistent? Do I have duplicate data sitting in my database? Are there other things that I need to be thinking about? Again, just trying to tie it all back together and make sure that the data we have in the system is valid. Now, there's a big gotcha here. Of course, when we look at cost control, as a lot of us have to, we've got to be really careful that we're not over a license limit in order to control our costs within the Marketo platform. We then have something called program templates in Marketo. So you'll probably have recognized that building campaigns in Marketo can sometimes be challenging. There's a lot of effort that goes into building them in the right way. Or maybe you're not getting the results out that you want. So reporting an ROI, how do we get the results back from the platform? This kind of ties together, right? So we've got a good program templates, which we can simply clone and fill in the gaps or color by numbers, however you want to describe it. But again, building in the reporting standard that we want. So whether we want to measure email performance, content performance, multi-channel performance, or even multi-touch performance, we can do that all natively within Marketo. Now, if you're thinking, well, how do I go and get a Marketo audit? We do them for free. So go and have a look at this page, and we'll send you a link after this to go and have a look at this. The audit that we've put together really was to answer the key questions. Are we using Marketo effectively? Are we using what we're paying for? And is there a better way to do it? Or what are the gaps that we've got? So we often find a few common scenarios, things like revenue models, things like email performance, good modular email templates, which are the basis of effectiveness in Marketo. Again, we'll give you a list of actions that you can go away and work on internally, absolutely free. And again, give you some guidance on how do you get more results out of your Marketo platform. And when we talk about data hygiene, there's often a challenge here, right? And I love talking about this topic actually, because who owns data within your organization? Is it marketing? Is it sales? Is it an administration team? Is it IT even who owns data? But there's quite a few elements of data hygiene that impact the successful results of a marketing campaign. So whether it's duplicate records, whether we've got bounced or dirty data in the database, or maybe your preference center isn't working. Maybe it's not communicating out to the right people, or you've not got people joining your new preference lists. Whatever those challenges might be, going back to the basics of how the data and segmentation should be working will help you drive results in Marketo. Now, there is a handbook, again, available on our website, and I'm not going to just punt you lots and lots of resources during this webinar, but they are pretty useful. It's been one of our most downloaded handbooks on our website. You can find it at jtfmarketing.co/resources. There is step-by-step guides within those in terms of how do I analyze my data? How do I understand what works and what doesn't? It's definitely worth having a look at. There is also a free data hygiene report available as well. So if you want one of those, let me know and I can reach out to you after this call to get you set up. That'll give you a visualization of the data in Marketo and will really allow you to understand, where are your opportunities to clean up your data. When I think about data hygiene, I'm often thinking about what is relevant, what are we working, what is engaged, what is not engaged, will we engage it, won't we engage it, and therefore what steps can we then take in order to clean up the overall size of the database. Now, I mentioned to you about program templates already. These are pre-built campaigns. So you'll see on the screenshot on the right-hand side, I've got a few examples of different campaigns. So I've got a web page, I've got a case study, I've got an email send, a webinar, download, a blog, a video. You can build these out for any scenario that you want to build them out for. Of course, they're developed mainly for a use case or a purpose. So maybe you'll have a specific training event, or maybe it's a product webinar or a thought leadership webinar. You might measure those slightly different because you want to see the results of them independently of each other. You don't want to just measure all webinars the same, because all webinars have different objectives. And so making sure that you're building your programs in order to match those is really important. Now, there's a gotcha here is you've got to use something called channels and tags in Marketo. And if you're not so familiar with those, it is the reporting standard within the Marketo Engage platform. It's really important we put those in place, we customize them so that we can track various kinds of content. Now, one wonderful thing about program templates in Marketo is we can actually accelerate our time to build, our time to execution. So again, this is about filling in the gaps. It's about speeding up the process. It's about executing at pace. You can also do this, by the way, through the API. So if you wanted to say, we know what our webinar schedule is going to look like for the next 12 months. We want to build all those programs right now so that they're ready to go. And all we've got to do is quality check them, enable them, and start promoting them on a regular basis through newsletters or website capture forms. You can do that. So you can actually get ahead of yourself. And this seems alien to us in the world of marketing, to be able to build all of our campaigns in advance and not be running down to the wire, right? Of course, we rely on content. But when you standardize the process that you're following in terms of build, you can do it at a much faster pace. Of course, we get great tools like ChatGPT who can also help us develop some of that content and fill in any of the gaps that we're missing, like pre-headers or certain information about an event. Now, the important part here is to make sure that you are documenting these program templates and that your Marketo users are familiar with how do you use them and how do you maximize them. We can help you with a lot of this. There's a lot of stuff that's off the shelf now, which you'll be able to take away and implement into your team or customize for your use case. So it's really important that you do this in the early stage of Marketo in order to make sure that you can scale everything moving forward. Now, I've already mentioned channels and tags in Marketo, and they are really, really important because they are the architecture behind reporting. So if you're not too familiar with them, let me give you a very quick tour. So on the screenshot on the right-hand side, you'll see we've got an example of us editing a channel. The channel here is the download, and we've got a couple of different criteria that we're measuring. One is whether someone's visited the page. One is whether someone's engaging with that piece of content. And the third one is whether they filled out the form. Now, these are completely customizable to your business, but the most important one is the success, because we're going to measure success by the number of people who have filled out this form. Now, you'll see here we've got analytics behavior that says normal requires cost period. When we're building a download program in Marketo, we want to assign a period cost to every single program that we are building. So take the example of a download. We've got to write the copy. Let's say the copyright is $2,000. Let's say we've got to then go and get it designed, which is another $1,000. Let's say we're then going to go and promote it through various channels. Maybe that's another $5,000. This becomes the cost of you developing this asset. Now, once we apply cost periods to a program, we can start to see in the analytics the return on investment, cost per new name, cost per success. And if you've got a CRM integrated, you'll also be able to see the opportunities generated off the back of this specific campaign. Now, of course, when we get into a world of multi-touch, which we all live in, it's a bit harder, but there are ways which we can do that within Marketo using the Marketing Performance Insights reports. So again, there's lots of options available to us to get this reporting out of the platform and make sense of it. This is very practitioner-led because we're looking at what works, what performs well, how do we improve, what are our opportunities, but it will definitely help you focus in on where your opportunities are to optimize. Now we start talking about building a digitalization roadmap. And as I mentioned to you before, if you run one of our free audits, you're going to get a bunch of recommendations. We will typically prioritize them into 3 categories. Urgent, do it in the next 6 months. Immediate, do it in the next 12 months. It's going to benefit you. And then roadmap to kind of 12 plus months. Now, these are always technical recommendations, but if you want to, we can also support you in building your marketing strategy into a digitalized roadmap. So what are we going to do? What campaigns are we going to build? How is that going to come together? These are all the elements that sometimes are a challenge when you're not an expert in Marketo or you've not got an experience of how do we get from A to B. So when we talk about building this roadmap, we look at it in 2 elements. One, an as-is assessment, where are we right now and where do we want to be? And that might be as bold as saying, we generate 500 leads a month, we've got to be generating 5,000. How do we get there? How do we use the technology in order to get us there? We then get into the implementation and education section. So it's great that maybe you'll work with an external party to help you grow your business or help you achieve your marketing objectives, especially surrounding technology. But we've got to educate each other and say, this is what we need to achieve, this is how we are achieving it, and work from there. We then get into a cycle of measurement and optimization. We've got to keep moving the needle, because actually we build a lead scoring model, we can't leave it sitting still, so we've got to keep evolving, keep optimizing. Now, I'm sure some of you have been through projects where you're looking at that big greenfield thinking, right? You're thinking about what's the future look like? How do we think about where we want to be in 12 months' time? Some of you may have a very detailed strategy. It's very clear. You know exactly where you're going to go. You know exactly what money you've got to spend. Therefore, this can be sometimes a lot easier. But there's often a lot of businesses who are, we know we need to grow. We know we're going to contribute to revenue, but we can't do that yet. We don't know how to do that yet. So it's measuring where are we now and what is going to get us to that place where we want to be. Going through this process is multifaceted, because we're not only looking at the technology and how does the technology tie together, but also the people and the process within your organization. We're also looking at if there's any blockers that's going to stop us, right? Because let's face it, marketing are under pressure to deliver more with less. And we've got to make sure that every penny we spend, we can justify. So if we can take that conversation back to the business and say, hey, we can't tell you how much money we generated from our marketing campaigns because the CRM doesn't work or the integration's not there or whatever it might be, you've then got a business case that you're starting to develop. So out of this as is and to be assessment, we can then start to tie things together and see this is what we're going to need to be able to do in the future, and work our way back to what are the foundational steps and what are the building blocks that we're going to have to put in place in order to get there. Now, as we talk about those building blocks and starting to tie them together, we have to actually have an honest look at the technology we have in the business, the integrations that are in place, and also the processes. So whether it's from a data acquisition perspective through events and uploads and cleanliness of data, or whether it's an integration to your CRM or a back office integration that feeds you sales information into Marketo, whatever that might be, we've got to build those into, this is a blocker for X, Y, Z. This is a blocker for this. This is going to stop us achieving this result. And that goal and those implementations will really help us just map out a realistic timeline, because we are often pretty ambitious in marketing, hoping that IT will just jump along with us and take some stuff off the list, because sometimes the integrations are very simple, but we end up down a path of complex integrations. Again, how do we keep things easy? How do we build upon it and variations over time? That's the most important thing when we look at scaling the way we're using our technology. As I mentioned already, that education of your team, your internal team, how do we get them the capabilities to not only use the technology, but understand the processes, understand best practice design of campaigns, understand how to communicate back to alternative stakeholders who they generally might not have had the experience with. Good examples, IT, business leaders, etc. How do we go back and talk in the language that they talk in order to get what we need to be successful? And then we hit the measurement and optimization space. So we talk about measuring in Marketo, not only the campaigns, but have we actually been successful in generating new leads? Have we been successful in getting conversions through our current MQL database into SQL? What is the conversion rate? What does that look like? What is our time to sale, et cetera, et cetera? There's loads of questions that we could put back from a business lens to understand whether what we are doing is working. But we've also got to be realistic and understand that in some organizations, it takes an extremely long time to move the needle and get some evolution of process. So whether you want to go from a newsletter that you're sending every month to an always-on marketing program, that's not going to happen overnight. Of course it can, but there's a business change process that goes with that in terms of changing the view of each individual. Of course, we've got to be understanding what exactly has been the impact of our investment of time, this project, or even the actions that we put together from only a Marketo perspective. Have they really given us an improvement? What have they been able to provide the business as upside. So whether it's more leads, better quality, reduction in time to sale, there's quite a few measurements again that we can put in place. And of course, if you're interested, please do go and request one of our free audits, which will give you an overview of how well are you using the platform. And it's always quite useful if you've inherited an instance as well. So if you're trying to figure out what's working, what doesn't work, how do we do stuff better? Is there something that's not quite right? I just need to unpick some stuff. We can also help you do some of that as well. I really appreciate your time and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.